Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Sarasvati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Mukam karoti vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda Madhavam. Okay, so we'll go ahead and before we start today, we'll chant from verse 11 to 25 because those are very, very important verses in the Bhagavad Gita. So please go ahead and turn your books to those pages. We'll chant together, okay? Shri Bhagavan Vacha Ashochanan Vashochastvam Prajnavadanshcha Bhashase Gatasunagatasunshcha Nanushochanti Panditaha. Verse number 12 from chapter 2. Natvevaham jatu nasam Natvam neme janadhipaha Nachaiva na bhavishyamaha Sarve vayamatah param. Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaram yauvanam jara Tatha dehantara praptihi Dhirastatra na muhyati. Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukha dukkadaha Agamapayino anityaha Tan stitikshasva bharata. Yam hi navyathayantyete Purusham purusharshabha Samadukha sukham dhiram Somritatvaya kalpate. Nasato vidyate bhavaha Na bhavo vidyate sataha Ubhayorapi drishtontaha Tvanayostattvadarshibhihi Avinashitu tadvidhi Yena sarvamidam tatam Vinashamavyayasyasya Na kaschit kartumarhati. Antavanta ime dehaha nityasyokta sharirinaha anashino prameyasya tasmadyudhyasva bharata. Ya enam veti hantaram yaschainam manyate hatam ubhau tau na vijanitaha nayam hanti na hanyate na jayate mriyate bakadachit nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyaha ajo nitya shashvato puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire veda vinashinam nityam ya enamajam abhyayam katham sapurusha partha kam ghatayati hantikam vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grannati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Nainam chindanti shastrani nainam dahati pavakaha na chainam kledayantyapaha na shoshayati marutaha अच्छेद्यो यमदाह्यो ह्यम् अक्लेद्यो शोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतस्थाणुः अचलोऽयं सनातनः अव्यक्तोऽयमचिन्त्योऽयम् अविकार्योऽयमुच्यते तस्मादेवं विदित्वैनं नानुशोचितुमर्हसि. Okay, so verses 11 to 25. So let's just recap a little bit on Bhagavad Gita. It started with Dhritarashtra's question. And he asks Sanjaya, Sanjaya, what are my people and the Pandavas doing in the battlefield? And so Sanjaya goes to tell him what's happening in the battlefield. And what happens is Arjuna is so ready. You know, you see him ready. He even tells Lord Krishna, place me in between the two armies. Let me see who I'm going to fight. Place me in front of the enemy. I want to see them. And when he sees them, particularly who Bhishma and Drona, particularly his gurus, his teachers, he breaks down. And he tells Lord Krishna, I can't fight. There's no way I can fight. Earlier, he was so prepared to fight. And then after seeing his gurus on the battlefield, he says, I can't fight. And he gives Lord Krishna so many arguments. And we went through all of those arguments in chapter 1. And they seem so logical too. And we would even think that Arjuna's right. But then Lord Krishna doesn't say anything. He just listens and listens and listens to Arjuna. And then in chapter 2, we see a very beautiful scenario from verses 1 to 10, where Arjuna goes on to keep talking about why he can't fight. But then he does the most important thing, where he surrenders to Lord Krishna. And this is in verse 2.7. So that's a really, really important verse where he says, Shishyaste aham. I am your shishya. Shadhi me tvam prapanna. Please teach me. I am your student. Now you please tell me. I thought of so many things in my mind, but I'm even not convinced by my own arguments. I don't even know what to do. I am dharma samudha chetaha. I'm just so confused about this dharma. I know I'm a kshatriya. I know that. I know what a kshatriya is supposed to do, but I can't bring myself to do it. And so When Arjuna finally surrenders to Lord Krishna smiles. He says, now finally I can give Arjuna some tips. I can give him some advice. But deeper than that, I can give him some knowledge. So in chapter 1, what we saw was Arjuna Vishada Yoga, where Arjuna was really in grief. And you saw a little bit more of that in the beginning of chapter 2. Now, chapter 2 is called Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. Now, we're wondering, why is it the yoga of knowledge? I mean, Arjuna is in so much grief right now. Why knowledge? And so this is the key factor. What is the cause of Arjuna's grief? What was the cause of it? Was it fear? Was he afraid to fight the Kauravas? No, because he fought the Kauravas before. We studied Mahabharata. He fought the Kauravas before. He's quite fearless. Parantapa, he's a scorcher of foes. Is it death really that he's fearing? Well, Arjuna has fought in war, so he's seen death before. And even if he dies, then what happens is that's really, really royal for Kshatriya. A Kshatriya who dies in the battlefield, there's no greater honor than that. And we'll see that also as the verses come about. So what is Arjuna's grief? So from death, we know that it's not death. We come to a deeper level. His fear, not his fear, his grief is rather delusion, because of delusion. What do you mean by delusion? It's not death, but death of my gurus. We saw this also when we studied the Gita together. Death happens every day to everyone in everyone's place, in every country. It happens every day. Does it affect you and me? No, it doesn't. But when it's my family, when it's my loved one, when it's my close relative, then I really get affected. So what is affecting Arjuna is not death per se, but delusion, which we call moha. This shoka, this grief, is because of moha. He feels like that's my guru, that's my teacher. And how does this sense of my come about? How do I think that somebody is mine? Just think, how did I ever think that my wife or husband is mine? My child is mine. My mother or father is mine. Where did that mine come from? That mine comes from I. So the delusion of my and mine comes from I. Because without me identifying with this body, with this mind, with this intellect, or with this ego, without me thinking that I am this ego, there is no my. The minute I say I am Shubhani, that's it. It's my apartment, my parents, my class, my everything, my family, everything, my. The minute that I say I, there's my. So Arjuna's problem is not grief per se, it's delusion of me and mine. That me and mine is really I. And therefore, this thinking that I'm I, thinking that I'm the body, I'm the mind, I'm the intellect, why do we think that? We think that because of ignorance. Because we don't know who we are. We don't know that we are the real self. We are that Atman. We don't know that. So Arjuna's grief is because of ignorance. This is the connection. This is the first connection that we have to make when we enter chapter 2. Arjuna's Vishada, his breaking down, it's not a simple grief. It is because of ignorance. And in fact, all of our grief, all of the sorrow that we're experiencing in life is only because of ignorance. And the more we identify The more we identify with the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, the more grief we have. The more I think that I am Shubhani or I am a person, the more grief I will have. The less that I think I am a person, the less grief I will have. So it's directly proportionate. So grief boils down to ignorance. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, I will give Arjuna knowledge. Because the root cause of his grief is ignorance, I will give Arjuna knowledge which will remove ignorance. And that's why chapter 2 is called Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. And Lord Krishna starts giving this knowledge in verse number 11. What does he say in verse number 11? He says in verse number 11, Ashochan and Vashochastva. You are grieving over those who need not be grieved over. Prajna Vadanscha Bhashase. You are speaking as if you are wise. Gatasun, Agatasuncha. People are either gone or they're going. Na anushochanti panditaha. The wise never grieve. Arjuna, you are grieving for those who deserve not to be grieved over. And you are speaking as though you are wise, but really speaking, the wise never grieve. What does this mean? The wise never grieve. The wise never grieve means not that sorrow doesn't come to a wise person or a realized or enlightened person. Not that sorrow doesn't manifest. Sorrow manifests, but they do not become sorrowful. Joy manifests, but they do not become joyful. That anushochanti means they don't follow the sorrow, they don't follow the joy, because they will become joyful or they will become sorrowful. That's not what a wise person does. It comes, it goes. It has nothing to do with me, is the attitude of a wise person. Therefore, he tells Arjuna, the wise don't grieve. And I will tell you why. Why is it that they're able to let go of everything? How is it that a wise person can just be? Because a wise person knows who they really are. And Lord Krishna begins to tell Arjuna Atma Vidya. He begins to tell Arjuna, you are really the self. You are eternal. You're not this body. You're not this mind, this ego, this intellect. You're not any of this. You are eternal. There was never a time when you were not there. And there was never a time where you will not be there. And even as many, many different bodies came into your life, there was that one changeless aspect. What is it in you that's changeless? So many bodies came, from when you were young, to when you were a teenager, to when you were married, to when you're a little older. So many bodies came, so many bodies left. But what in you didn't change? So many different personalities came and left. Your mind changed so many times. Your personality, your who you are changed so many times. What is it in you that remained changeless? That eternality which remained changeless and will always remain changeless, that's called Sat, Arjuna, and that's who you are. That is Sat. And he tells Arjuna this really profound thought. That's who you are. Now, knowing that you're eternal, knowing that you're changeless, what can happen to you? Not only are you Sat, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you are Avinashi, you're indestructible. Nothing can actually destroy you. Nothing can burn you. Nothing can wet you. Nothing can dry you. Nothing can cut you. No weapon can touch you, because you are that pure self or Atma, which is even subtler than space. Space can't even be cut or burnt. or wet or dried. What to talk of Atma? You are that subtlest of the subtle Atma that nothing can touch. And Arjuna, he says, you are that Atma which is all pervading. Means there's one Atma that's all pervading. And that is you. That is the essence of me. We are one. And this eternal self, which is indestructible, is pure awareness. It's aprameya. He says aprameya. Means you cannot think of it because it's that which illumines thoughts. You cannot know it, which illumines knowledge itself. It's aprameya. Therefore, it illumines everything. It's an awareness. And this self is never born. It will never die. Na jayate mriyate va kadachit. It is never born. It will never die. It's sanatana. So this self is eternal. It's changeless. It is indestructible. It is pure awareness. And it is never a doer or an enjoyer of anything. So as I had explained to you, that in any transaction, you have what is called the triad, or what we call the triputi. There's a knower, there is the known, and there's the knowledge. So I, for example, am the knower, and I know this book. And that which takes place is called knowledge. I, the knower, know this bottle. And that which takes place is knowledge. The self is not the knower. The self is not the object known, nor is the self this knowledge. The self is that which illumines all of that. It's out of the triad. It's pure awareness. So the knower, the feeler, the thinker, the perceiver, that's not the self. The enjoyer, that's not the self. You are that which illumines all of that. And you are never the doer, you are never the enjoyer. So who is killing who? And thus Lord Krishna says, Arjuna, knowing all of this, how can you still be sorrowful? How can you still grieve, knowing you're the self? Arjuna says, I'm still grieving. I'm still grieving. You told me all of these things. It's as though Arjuna is saying, you told me all of these things. In 11 to 25 is what I said. All of these things. You told me all of these things, but yet I still feel it in my heart. It's still painful. I don't know what to do. This is what Arjuna's expression as though is. So Lord Krishna knows this. Lord Krishna says, wow, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of work with Arjuna. And not just with Arjuna, with all of us. So when Lord Krishna is talking to Arjuna, he's talking to all of us. Because it's very hard. This self-knowledge is not easy. It requires a pure mind, single-pointed mind. And as I said before, if we get 11 to 25, no need to come to class, just revel in the self. But if we didn't, class, oh class, we have to go through it again and again. So Lord Krishna, as though seeing Arjuna's expression, says, okay, now I will come a level down. So 11 to 25 is the highest level. I'm telling you, thou shalt not grieve from the level of Atma. Because you are the eternal self, you should not grieve. Now Lord Krishna says, okay, let's say you think you are the Jiva. Let's say you don't think you are Atma. So Atma means the self, pure self, untouched, Sakshi, witness. The Jiva means individual, the doer, the enjoyer, that personality, our name, that's called Jiva. So Lord Krishna says, if you think you're the Jiva, even then you shouldn't grieve. And let me tell you why. So verses 26 and 27 will be from the Jiva standpoint. So I will chant and then you can repeat verse 26 of chapter 2. Atha chainam nitya jatam. And Padmini ji, if you could please repeat.
Yes. Atha chainam nitya jatam.
Nityam va manyase mritam.
Nityam va manyase mritam.
Tathapi tvam mahabaho.
Tathapi tvam mahabaho.
Naivam shochitum arhasi.
Naivam shochitum arhasi.
Together. Atha chainam nitya jatam. Nityam va manyase mritam. Tathapi tvam mahabaho. Naivam shochitum arhasi. He says, atha cha means now and, means in case, enam means this atma or this self, in case this self, manyase, in case this self you think of it, how? Nitya jatam, you think that it's always born, constantly born, and nityam mritam, and it's dying. So in case you think this self is the jiva, that it's born and it dies, it's born and it dies. Tatha api, even then, tvam mahabaho, you, O Arjuna, na evam shochitum arhasi, you do not deserve to grieve. So you will see this common in 26 and 27. Na evam shochitum arhasi means you don't deserve to grieve. Okay? So he says, even if you think of him means the self, I'm reading Puja Gurudev's explanation, as being constantly born and constantly dying, even then, O mighty armed, you should not grieve. Mahabaho means mighty armed one. So Lord Krishna says, okay, so now we've come a level lower. If you think that the self, that Atma is Jiva, the individual, the enjoyer, the doer, if you think the self is the Jiva, constantly born and dying, constantly moving from body to body, if you think that that's the self, even then you shouldn't grieve. But why? Why shouldn't I grieve? As though Arjuna is asking, why shouldn't I grieve? So Lord Krishna now tells him, this is a very famous verse number 27. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu.
Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu.
Dhruvam janma mritasya cha.
Dhruvam janma mritasya cha.
Tasmad apariharyerthe.
Tasmad apariharyerthe.
Natvam shochitum arhasi.
Natvam shochitum arhasi.
Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Tasmad apariharyerthe. Natvam shochitum arhasi. Lord Krishna tells him, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu. Jatasya means of that which is born. He means again and again. Dhruvo mrityuhu means certainly there is death. Of that which is born, certainly there is death. And he means sometimes verily, indeed. But in this case, we will see the context of again and again it happens. So of that which is born, there is death. Then he says, mritasya cha janma dhruvam. Of that which has death, birth is certain. Therefore, tasmad apariharyerthe. Apariharye arthe means in this matter of inevitability. In this inevitable case, natvam shochitum arhasi. You deserve not to grieve. You should not grieve. So he tells Arjuna, look, that of that which is born, death is certain. Of that which dies, birth is certain. This is the inevitability of life. Therefore, don't grieve. What have we seen in this world? The moment that we are born, it is certain we will die. Nobody comes out of life alive, right? Everyone will die at a certain point in time. It's just a matter of when, where, how, all of that, we don't know. But death is certain. Death of anything, not just of a human, but of anything, of an animal, of an object. Death of anything is absolutely certain. So it's quite a wonder that we wonder why death happened. It will happen. It will happen. There's this beautiful story of the Buddha. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard this, but it's of Gautami. And she, she gave birth and her baby was dead. And she goes to Buddha and she says, you are a Mahatma. I've heard so much about you. Now you please bring my baby back to life. Because, this is very painful. Certain deaths are more painful than others, especially those that are unexpected. And so she goes to him and he tells her, look, I can bring your baby back to life if you fulfill this condition. If you get me grains from someone's home who has not seen death. You have to go to the someone's home who has not seen death in their family. From them, you get some grains, you bring it to me, I'll bring your baby back to life. And so Gautami went from home to home to home. And everyone was willing to give her grains. But she said, but have you seen death in your family? And she would ask this question, have you seen death in your family? And everyone would keep saying yes, yes, yes. And so she wasn't able to get grains from there. And so she went back to the Buddha and she said, there's nobody who could give me grains. And she was silent. And he knew now that she knew that death is an inevitability. It has to happen. It will happen. And she became his first woman disciple. It is said, Gautami, without knowledge, without wisdom. So that is absolutely certain. It's not something we can change. It's not something we can rewrite. The only thing we can do is accept it, that it will come. For some people, it will come sooner. For some people, it will come later. But dhruvaha means certainly death will come. And in fact, I was reading, there's another verse here that quotes Mahabharata. Vidura tells Dhritarashtra after the war, he says, time is impartial. Time doesn't love anybody or hate anybody. Time is impartial. When it's anybody's time to go, they'll go. It is for sure. And at the same time, he says of that which dies, birth is certain. Of the jiva, not of atma, the jiva. Of that which dies, birth is certain. Sometimes, we feel so sad when people die. But actually, what if they're going to a better place, right? Maybe if they've done so much punya in this birth, they're going to a better place. Why should we feel sad? Let them go. Let them have a peaceful journey. Stop holding them back, right? They have fulfilled what they have come to do in this lifetime, in this world. Now let them go. They deserve a better life. Who are you and I to hold them back? So if of that which dies, definitely they'll be reborn. Let them go. Selfishly, we're holding them back. This is something we cannot avoid. And this is what we see in the world today. We see even in things, how things were born and they died and came back in another form, and they died and they came back, and they died and they came back. We see that plants die and another seed, a fruit comes, and then a seed is coming from that fruit. The fruit goes, the seed will bring up another plant. So we see this cycle of change, of death, of birth. So Arjuna, you cannot change this. This is the law of nature. You can't change this. Even if the jiva perishes, it's okay. It's really okay. Because it's inevitable. It has to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, the more we fight it, the harder it is. But when we just accept, it's much, much easier for us. So then Arjuna still doesn't look convinced. He says, okay, he's just pausing. He's just thinking, still not convinced. So Lord Krishna says, okay, now I'm going to come to the level of the body. Let us say you think this self is the body. Even then, you shouldn't grieve. Why is that? So let's go to verse number 28. Avyaktadini bhutani.
Avyaktadini bhutani.
Vyaktamadhyani bharata.
Vyaktamadhyani bharata.
Avyaktanidhananyeva.
Avyaktanidhananyeva.
Tatra ka paridevana.
Tatra ka paridevana.
Avyaktadini bhutani. Vyaktamadhyani bharata. Avyaktanidhananyeva. Tatra ka paridevana. So he says, now Arjuna, if you think that this Atma is the body, let us say, you think this Atma is a bhuta. Bhuta means this karya karana sanghata, this assemblage of, food, of the 5 elements, of bones, of body, of flesh, of muscle, of fat. If you think that this is the self, this is Atma, he says, Avyaktadini bhutani. This whole assemblage was avyakta, was unmanifest. Then vyakta madhyani. Vyakta means it became manifest. It became manifest madhyani, in the middle. So avyaktadini, adi, in the beginning it was unmanifest. In the middle it became manifest. Avyaktanidhanani eva. Again in the end it becomes unmanifest. Tatra ka paridevana. Why are you grieving, paridevana? Why are you lamenting? It's unmanifest, it becomes manifest, and then it becomes unmanifest again. Why are you grieving? So Lord Krishna is saying, look, isn't it true that there was a time where all of us were not? We were just unmanifest stage. We were not here. But slowly, this body became to manifest it because of all the food that we've been eating. It's manifest now. You can see it. Manifest means it's available for our senses. It's available for perception. At some time again, this body will be unmanifest because this body is just annamaya kosha. It's just food. So at some point it will rise. At some point it will go. Now, what is your lamentation here? Why again are you grieving? And this word tatra ka paridevana, this is what Vidura tells Dhritarashtra. I'm just going to read to you that line. It's very, very nice. So what happens here is that Vidura, this is in Stri Parva, where, Dhritarashtra is so sad. This is after the war. Dhritarashtra is just so sad, so, dejected about all the deaths that he sees. We saw when we studied Mahabharata, it's Stri Parva. It's that time where you see all of the bodies in the battlefield. And so Vidura tells Dhritarashtra, Adarshanad apatitaha punascha darshanam gataha neite tavana tesham tvam tatra ka paridevana. He says, look, they've been invisible before birth. They were avyakta. They were invisible before birth. All of a sudden, for some moment, they became vyakta. They became manifest. And then again, they were unmanifest. This is the cause of all of this. And he says, na ete tava, na tesham tvam, means they are not yours, nor are you theirs. Therefore, why should you grieve over such a disappearance? They're not yours. You are not theirs. And so that's what Vidura tells Dhritarashtra. This I and mine, that's the real problem. When we feel that everybody came to this world for me, as my husband, my wife, my parents, my child, we came for each other, we are there for each other, that all is good, but nobody really came here for you and me. Nobody. Everybody came to fulfill their vasanas. That's all. Nobody came here for me. Nobody came here for you. As romantic and as nice as it sounds, it is just absolutely not true. We all came because we have to fulfill and exhaust our vasanas, and then we go. That's it. That's really what happens. And don't think that that's the first child that you had, or this is the first set of parents you had. We've had many parents before. We've had many children before. So you are not the first set of parents your child has seen. Your child is not your first child. So many cycles have come and gone. It's just we are all traveling together. For some moment in time, we're traveling together because we have a common karma that we have to exhaust. After that, we'll go. And that's life. Everybody has to go their own way. And at the end, everybody will walk alone. What we can do is be very accepting of it. That this is part of my journey. You are all part of my journey. I am part of your journey. We're together. And as we're together, let's make the most out of it. Let's learn from each other, love each other, be with each other. But when it's time to leave, we also should leave each other. Because that's the way life works. It's inevitable. It will happen. The best thing we can do is be prepared for it. Know that we are just traveling. This is just like one stop. After that, hopefully we don't have to keep traveling again and again. But if we have to come back, and again, it's another journey and another flight and another people that we have to be with. So Lord Krishna tells this to Arjuna. Even from the standpoint of the body, don't grieve. Don't grieve. It's just unmanifest, manifest, unmanifest. The real problem of grief, remember, is I and mine. It's mine, me, coming from I, coming from ignorance. That I think that I'm this body, this mind, this intellect. Then Arjuna says, as though, he's as though stunned. And Lord Krishna, very, very beautifully, he says, Arjuna, this is not an easy thing. This knowledge of the self that I explained to you from 11 to 25, I know it's not easy. I know it's a little bit challenging. And I'll tell you why. And so this is a very, very beautiful verse. We'll just touch upon this verse and then, we can continue it next week. We'll chant it. So I'll chant and then you can repeat. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidенам.
Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidенам.
Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyaha.
Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyah.
Ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti.
Ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti.
Shrutvaapyenam vedana chaiva kaschita.
Shrutvaapyenam vedana chaiva kaschid.
Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidенам. Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyaha. Ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti. Shrutvaapyenam vedana chaiva kaschita. So this word ascharyavat means as a wonder. Lord Krishna says, look, I get it. I know this can be a little bit tough. Why? Ascharyavat. It's like a wonder. And what is a wonder? Enam. Enam here means Atma or the self. Ascharyavat kaschit enam pashyati. The one who sees this self is a wonder. Tatha eva, also to anyaha, the one who vadati, the one who speaks about the self, ascharyavat, is also a great wonder. Ascharyavat cha enam anyashrunoti. And those who listen about the self, they're a great wonder. Ascharyavat, they are also a great wonder. Shrutva api, and those who having heard about enam, about this self, naveda. And if they don't get it, they don't kaschit, na veda kaschit. If they don't get it, that's also a wonder. So one who sees this is a wonder. Another speaks of this is a wonder and speaks of also a wonder. The one who hears about this is also a wonder. And having heard it, the one who doesn't get it is also a wonder. So first of all, this word ascharya, wonder. What does this word wonder mean? Very beautifully, Guruji says, acharati iti ascharya. When we say, wow, that's a great wonder. Because we're not able to logically explain it. We see it. It's so fantastic. It's so beautiful, but we can't explain it. How is it possible? How could it be? The wonder in nature is how many different shades of green we have. How is it that the sun rises and sets every day? Every day. How is it that it does that? How is it that everything stays in its own orbit? How is it that the bodies are made so perfectly that everything can function according to its nature? These are the things we can't explain. We can't quite understand. We can't put our finger to it. So we call this ascharya. We're wowing at it. Same like how when people come to New York City. There are tourists who come to New York City and they come and they're so wowed at Times Square and so wowed at Broadway and all of the things at the Hudson River. They're so wowed at it. But for us, it's like nothing. We're like, yeah, it's okay. But for us, when we go to like greenery, when we see like a lake, we're like, wow, you know, that's ashcharya for us. So ashcharya for different people are different, you know. For some people, food is ashcharya. How did this combination come with that combination? That's ashcharya. So the wonder is that feeling or emotion that we get where we really can't say or explain what it is, but we're wowed by it. Now, why is all of this a wonder? That we will take up next week, okay? Because I have to also make a few announcements. So that we will take up next week. But first, before we close, I will summarize and then we'll go from there. So what we saw today is we saw Arjuna, who really was going through a lot of grief. And that's why the first chapter is Vishada Yuga, lots of grief. But we saw what the root cause of everyone's grief is, not just Arjuna, everyone's grief. The cause of grief is moha, delusion, me, mine. That's the cause. Why that happens? Because I think I'm the body, mind, intellect. Why that happens? Because of ignorance. Therefore, Sri Krishna, seeing all of this, said, this is what Arjuna needs. He needs self-knowledge. And that's why chapter 2 is Sankhya Yoga. And Lord Krishna gives him that self-knowledge by saying the wise don't grieve because the wise know who they are. And who you are, Arjuna, is you are that eternal self. You are that eternal Atman, that self which is indestructible, which is changeless, which is pure awareness, never born, will never die. You are that same consciousness in every single being. That's your nature. And if you hold on to this, definitely, Arjuna, you will not grieve. Sorrow may come, but you will not grieve. But it's as though Arjuna didn't really get it. So Lord Krishna says, okay, look, let's say you think that Atma is a jiva or individuality. Let's say you think that. Even then you shouldn't grieve because for certain, death is for certain, birth is for certain. People will die. People will be born. It's a certainty. We can't change that. It will happen. Nobody can escape it. So it's a difficult thing. Nobody said it's easy, but we can't escape it. It will have to happen at some point or sometime. So the best thing we can do is understand that that was the right time. And don't think that, you know, by dying that jiva is sad. That jiva might have a better place to go to. Why do you and I think that we're the best person to be with that jiva? Yeah, they should be with better people than you and I, don't you think? Right? They should have a better life. So let them go. Then, you know, it's as though Arjuna doesn't get it. So Lord Krishna says, if you think that Atma is the body, let's say if you think Atma is the body, oh, why are you grieving? It's just coming from unmanifest to manifest to unmanifest. This is all, you know, one day that dal, idli, sabji, all of that, it comes up, it's auntie and uncle ji. Then next thing it's ghost, it's gone, right? It's just unmanifest, manifest, unmanifest. That's it. That's what happens to all of our bodies. It happens. So Arjuna he's just stunned. And Lord Krishna says, I know why you're stunned. Because whole thing is a wonder. It's a great, great wonder. And why it's a wonder, we will see more next week. Okay? So let's say the closing prayer. I'll make a few announcements, and then those who want to stay back, who have questions, who are new, I'm happy to stay back and help out. Okay? Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.